3.9.
I'm glad you corrected me, because that makes a big difference, and so it is 3.9, and the last number I had heard was the other. So, thank you.
Any other? Yes, Mr. Mishu.
Yeah, just quick point. The new Tier 1 and the new Tier 2 are drastically different than the original Tiers 1 and the original Tier 2. So if you want to look at them, they are quite different than they were on Tuesday night.
One's the same, two's quite different.
Well, 2's quite different, yeah, but it is a drastic difference. So just to make sure people are aware, so when those two are being talked about, you realize they are different. Because the Tier 3's section, option A, option B, and option C are where it gets a little more critical with nurses, librarians, and foreign language teachers.
Superintendent Ray, could you help us understand, I know that we had talked about the Tier 1, and that basically was like a 2% on the mill rate, and then, so if we went to the new Tier 2 or the Tier 3A, how does that factor?
If you looked at, I guess I gotta get it, I was on tiers, I guess I should have came up with another name. If you look at on the right-hand side of the page, Tier 1 for tonight,
It's 302.
if that's $302,000, and so if you reduce that, your increase is about 2.5%. If you look at the right, flip to the second part of it, and you look at the newest Tier 2, that's looking at about a 2.2% increase on the mill rate using those two tiers. I broke them down a bit differently for tonight because I felt like, as we had conversation the other night, the ranges and not that it, I mean, this is all significant, and I'm not trying to fool anyone that it isn't. But there's definitely a different, as you get to Tier 3 options, it is my feeling as superintendent that things begin to drastically change in programming. You change some philosophies that have been here in the past. On the first two tiers, we cut a little bit here, we've cut a little bit there, we've made some adjustments. Obviously, health insurance, I mean, the $120,000 in health insurance, if that comes, I mean, that's just kind of, it should go away. If you don't need it, you don't spend it, unless we want to take $120,000 and create some new programming. So, I mean, those first two tiers have, out of the impact, have the, in my opinion, the least effect to student achievement and safety. I think when you get into the three options on Tier 3, those are kind of wholesale changes in programming. And then the stuff that didn't even make a tier, I think it's just, it's just dangerously close to changing who we are and what we do. But I think the point of this is, again, the whole point of this exercise is to show people that there's, there's not fat left. We did that before this one. And then we took some more in the first round of kind of eliminations by the superintendent. So we'll always continue to whittle away and look to become more efficient and economize in any way you can. But really, if those first two tiers on the right-hand side of the page tonight are much different to talk about, in my opinion, than if you're starting to talk about Tier 3.
Ms. Mishu.
Okay, I guess my next question is, what are we looking to accomplish tonight? Are we looking to accomplish sending something to the city council? Make a motion? All right, then I'll make a motion that we reduce tier 1 and tier 2 and send the rest of the budget to the city council.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Are we talking about the new tiers?
I'm talking about new tier 1 and new tier 2. Eliminate them from the budget and send the rest of the budget forward, which would include, in the budget that's going to the city council, all tier 3s would stay.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? Yes.
So basically, we're sending a 2.2% increase over last year to the city council. Is that correct, Mr. Ray?
That would be correct.
Just let me do the secretarial work here. Any discussion? Yes.
I'm not in support of that, and I won't vote for this at this time. However, I do think that we need to be unified, and we do need to bring something forth to the city council that we can all agree on. So I'd like to further the discussion. I think the 2.2 is just, it's too low. I'm not interested in touching tier 2. I'll tell you that right now. And there are some things many things on tier 1 that I don't want to touch either. So I'm going to vote against this, and I hope that we can come back and look at some different things. I could offer an amendment, but my amendment wouldn't even be reasonable, quite honestly, so.
Thank you. Any more discussion before we vote? Seeing no one, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Please keep your hands up so I can record it. Opposed? It's a tie. I cast the vote to break that tie, to reject that motion.
I'll offer a motion to submit the budget with 2 adjustments. One, the reduction for $120,000 for the health insurance, and the $19,000 that was identified as erroneous stipends.
Second.
Okay, want to repeat that, Jim, please?
The budget, as it stands, with the reduction for health insurance of $120,000 and the correction for erroneous stipends of $19,000.
Okay. And who made the second? Heather.
Mr. Emerson,
Any discussion?
there's one of those in that line is important. One of those is out of all those numbers in tier 1, there's an add of $25,000 for construction at JFK and the BPS modular out back, so that we can look to bring the day treatment programming back into the district. So I have to have
I'll amend my
Thank you.
motion, if I may, or adjust it
Okay.
to add back $25,000. So it's a reduction of 120, a reduction of 19, and an increase of $25,000.
Okay. Yes.
So Jim, just let me understand that that doesn't involve tier 2. Okay, thank you.
Any more discussion? Everybody clear? Go ahead. There was, the second was by Mrs. Mills.
We The 2.5 is a solid number. I think it appeases the interests of both sides. I think Tammy's right. We need to be unified in sending this to the city council, because when it gets to the city council, it is going to be discussed, but only in large pieces. They are not going to go into it like we do. And they're gonna come back with a number, and we're gonna be back in the same situation. 2.5 is a good number. Keeping Tier 2 out, keeping the original Tier 2 out, you know, that's good. I mean, we've made sure that we've kept the freshmen and kept the 7th grade athletics. We've done well, you know, the 2.5. But if you send this to the city council with that small of a cut, or that small of a reduction, it is going to come back to us. Or maybe they'll approve it, and they'll send it to voters. And then it'll get sent back to us, just like it did last year. This is going to be another fiasco, just like we had last year.
Mrs. Florent?
I respectfully disagree with Mr. Moriarty in that I believe we do have the support of the city council as far as budget goes. I mean, we were instructed to do, you know, what did we call it? It was a fancy term, but, you know, what the sky's the limit kind of thing last year. I think we learned from that. This is not the sky's the limit anymore. This is, you know, what can we offer that's reasonable, what we've offered in the past. We're not adding programs at all. We've condensed programs. We've taken a person who's done one major position in the past, and now they're you know, there's a principal and a director of adult ed put together working extra hard, you know. We've done a lot of that work. So I do think the city council is going to support this. The issue comes when we go to referendum. But we have time to work with the public. And we can't just leave here after this and then say, oh, it'll happen. We each have to do our piece, and we have to go to our neighbors and say, you got to get out there. I know you work until 6, but you really need to do this. And encourage each other, because that's really the only way it will pass. I agree. We could be at, and that's a little scary too, because when you start the school year and you can't purchase anything and you can't pay people, then, you know, they're going to look and say, well, what's going on? So it's a little bit of a gamble, but I'm willing to go that step to make sure that we get what we need for the kids. And I look at the Tier 1, you know, even in the Tier 1, there are many things that I don't want to see go. And I have a question about the literacy specialist, Mr. Ray. In the new tier, I don't see that. Does that mean that could you explain that to me, where that would be, if it falls anywhere?
The literacy specialist position is, when I put the new tiers out there tonight, that was saying that is as far as I think we should dare to go.
Okay, all right, good. All right,
And, you know, that's it.
okay, all right.
Thank you, Mr. Emerson. And then Mr. Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Terry, do you have a chance? Since everyone seems to be interested in the percentage of change on the mill rate, I asked Mrs. Dobbin what...
This is just an estimate, because Kurt and I worked on this all morning. I'm guessing it's around a 0.6, so it would be a 3.3, I'm guessing.
So with the question that's on the table, as it stands right now, with the 120 reduction, the 19 reduction, and adding back 25, it's a 3.3%.
I believe so.
Okay.
It's hard to back those numbers in, but that would be an estimate.
So it's between 3.2, 3.5, maybe,
Yeah.
ish.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Mishu? No, come here.
Yeah, this is difficult to have a united front here, because your motion, I can't support. 3.3 exceeds the cost of inflation. And, you know, last year, you know, like I stated earlier, we want to get this passed to the city council. We want the city council to see that this is the lowest we can go without impacting our school system. And we want our administrators to move away from this and start focusing their efforts on educating our children. If we prolong this and say, okay, let's send this, and it might come back, and then if it does come back, and then if the state sends down, well, you just added $400,000 to your school budget because the retirement system is going to pass the cost on to us, that's a major increase to us, and I don't see that ever passing. So if we can reduce it to as low as we can go, and then if the state requires us to absorb it, you know, we could say we can't go any lower, you know, I'm sorry, you have to incur this tax increase, but this is really best for our students. Tier 1 and Tier 2, if you look at it, do not have a dramatic effect on the school system at all. If we get to Tier 2, to Tier 3, then we're impacting our student population and the quality of their education to some degree. So, you know, I think we are being responsible, reducing Tier 1 and Tier 2 right now. And I can't support your motion. It'd be great, but I don't see it passing. Last year, we sent out an alert now, we sent out flyers to the parents to go vote, and it still failed. So I'm a little concerned about that.
Mrs. Florent?
I just want to mention two things. One, the 3.3 on the mill rate does include the debt service. So when you're talking about the cost of living, that's not really accurate in a couple of ways, because of the debt service that's there. That's not really talking about the cost of living and the increase to salaries and whatnot. The other piece is, I lost my train of thought. It's late. What was my other thought? Oh, my other thought was the city side, in that we're not really sure where they are, but, you know, I had heard at one point they had worked down to about a 3.3 increase themselves, and they were still working to try to figure that out. Well, if you look at that, their increase and then a 3.3 on the school side, that's pretty reasonable. So I think that, you know, what's happening on the city side definitely should affect our decision here, and it's tough to make that decision and be a united front when we don't really exactly know. So if we were to, let's just say, agree on this 3.3, then see what the city side is, we could always come back and say, you know what, let's work a little bit more together. So maybe we could start here.
Yeah. Mr. Emerson?
I agree with that because today's March 14th, and we have half a month, a full month, and another half a month to work with the council, to connect with the community, and understand what the state's going to do. And I just don't understand why we would want to go as lean as possible. And doing that is, going lean is not eliminating waste. We've been assured by the superintendent that fat and waste has already been eliminated well before this.
Just a clarification on the city side. Again, the council has not seen the budget yet. Department heads and the city manager have gone over it. It's somewhere around 4-point-some-odd%, but they haven't factored in the capital improvements, which are over $2 million, because nobody has come to an understanding of how to do that, because by itself, that's like a 1 mil rate. So that's the balancing act I was talking about. But there's still work in the numbers. Mr. Moriarty?
And that, Mr. Mayor, is a great example of some of the things that we have coming down the road. On the school side of it, we still have, you know, some projects to do to keep these schools in good condition and work to be done. I mean, the city has work to be done with roads, and we have work to do on these schools. We have roofs that we need to repair. If we don't repair the roof on one particular school, we are going to close it. That's what's going to happen. We're going to have to close the school. We're going to have to move a grade. because we have to fix this roof. We don't have the money for it. No, no, not in the budget. No. There, we have 2 roofs that we have to fix in the next 2 years. 2 years.
Bill, we don't have a full roof replacement in the budget.
No, but it's a 1.5, and the other one's a $500,000. I mean, that's the report that I have from the capital improvements.
That's full roof replacement. We can do a roof restoration that will give us, Phil, 15, 20 years maybe, but a guarantee of 5 to 10, guaranteed 5, for about $60,000 at BIS. But there's a difference. There's a restoration and there's replacement. They're 2 very, very different projects. And I think one of the things that we'll have to do is, honestly, I think looking at a restoration is one way to do it. And the other piece is, once you do it, you have to take care of it every single year. And that's something we don't particularly, society doesn't do very well with their buildings.
I guess my next question would be, how many times did we restore the high school?
That how we restored the high school, I have no history on how they did the roofs there. Our roofs at BPS and BIS have not been restored before, to our knowledge. So there is some money in the budget to do that at BIS this summer, which then I think in the future we'd look at a restoration at BPS next for the roof. And I just think good maintenance is something that we have to really consider, like putting some good amount of money in for maintenance on a thing like a roof, so you're not having a situation where every 15, 20 years you do a whole roof replacement. But Phil would be a better person to answer that question than I would be.
Mrs. Vadney?
I think the problem we're having here is we're asked to do something without all the information. We don't have what the city's going to do. We don't have an answer for the shift for Main State retirement. So we're trying to come up with a number to be responsible in the event these things occur. Which doesn't, say that again, Jim, because I can't hear you. If you want to say it, say it. So that's what I'm saying. I don't know what to do. You have the answer. I don't have the answer. I wish I did, what the right thing is to do. Definitely not to get in the same situation we were in last year, because that was a nightmare. And so, and I think it kind of set us up to the faith and the trust in the community, in our decision-making. So, and it causes a lot of problems. So we're trying to be responsible and also not to be judging to say, if I'm going to be responsible, that means I don't care about education. I don't think that's fair, because that's not true. That's not true. And that's the feeling I'm getting, that if I vote on a responsible way to not overly increase, so taxpayers will vote on this budget, then I don't care about education. That's what I'm getting. That's what I'm hearing. And that's not true.
Okay, so why don't we look at it this way, too? Again,
We need to look at it a different
What you're going to
way.
be voting on tonight is, again, even if you look at Tier 1 or Tier 2, those are not fixed in stone. There's going to be some movement in the next 2 months, maybe some better information will come forward. So the problem is that by charter, we get to deliver this thing quickly, and in reality, it makes no sense. So we give a particular number, but we continue to work on it, So, but you're right, Lisa, that there's all these moving targets, and it's tough to come up with what's right, but I know that there's no one on this board that's anti-education, is try to find the right, as I said earlier, the balance that's going to work. And, I think it's a mystery to all of us. I certainly don't have a master plan how this is going to work out, so, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Mayor. Everybody on the board absolutely supports education, or else we wouldn't be doing this. I did want to say that the process, in that if we went with the 3.3 tonight, it's not set in stone. It can be reopened and relooked at. And it can, there's so many things that can happen between now and May when we get the other numbers. And certainly, I'm going to have to relook and rethink my vote if we come back with $408,000 more because of Maine State retirement. And I'm willing to do that. Just as, if the city side has a 4-point whatever increase, I will also have to look. We can do that. We can reopen it. So I just suggest this as a starting point, and then I like to start, with the most we can give our kids, and then have to work backwards if need be.
Any other discussion? Mr. Michu?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but based on last year's experience with the city council, we send a 3.3% increase over to them. They're gonna accept it. I don't see them rejecting it. And that'll go to vote. And that's where I fear that the failure will come. And especially if we have to consider the city side increase. If the city side, comes in at 3.3, we're at 3.3, we may think of that, oh, we're even. The taxpayer sees that as 6.6. Major increase. We had a major increase last year. I know we all support education. We want the best for our kids. But the reality of the matter is we're not making any more money. And that's where the bottom line comes down to. People on fixed incomes, it's about choices, but I think my gut feeling is we'd lose that vote, and we'd start last year all over again. I think cutting Tier 1 and Tier 2 is being responsible without hurting the school system. I think we are doing our responsible duty. I think we're doing our duty to the citizens. I think we're doing our duty to the students. Tier 1 and Tier 2 will not drastically impact the Biddeford educational system. And remember, we have a great leadership team in place. They're going to do wonders with a 2.2 increased budget. They're going to move us forward. They're already doing great things, coming up with new ways to restructure, new programming, within a reduced budget. I believe in our administration, and I believe we can move forward and grow with a 2.2% for the future. I don't want our administration getting bogged down this fall, starting the year again with a failed budget, saying, oh my God, this is going to spend their whole fall again trying to pass a budget. I don't want to see that. I think it's time for Jeremy Ray to do what we hired him for, lead Biddeford to the future. If he's always working on the budget, trying to crunch and trying to cut, he's not really focusing much on education. And he's having his whole administrative team, come on, we got to come up with more cuts. They're not really focusing on education. I think let's do our job. Let's send the best reduced budget we can send to the city, stand by it, unify, say this, we can't go any lower. If the state sends us $400,000, we have to absorb that as a city, and let our administrators and Jeremy lead us and start working on education and not worry about a budget. I think if we send 3.3, I think the city council is going to accept it. I think they're going to pass it to vote. I think they're going to be, based upon history, they're going to be up there. And who's going to receive the blows because of, what happens on the city side? We do. We did it last year. I fear it'll happen again because the economy hasn't improved since last year.
Move the question.
Let me just say this. Let me try to make it a little bit easier
Okay, move the
on
question.
you. We seem to be getting bound up in this whole idea of what the council's going to be doing and so forth. That's going to fall onto me, inevitably. That's why they pay me the big bucks, the $11,000. Because somewhere at that point, you have to feel comfortable with the budget you're presenting, and you have to believe when you make this vote, if you feel that Tier 1's not going to impact, that's fine. Vote that way. But don't start thinking too much about what's the council going to do. You can't do that because when it comes before the council, I have to get involved at that point. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to have an awful hard time if all those governor's cuts come through. I'm going to have a hard time saying, yeah, we're going to put that on the mill rate. I'll be honest, I don't see how we can do that. But that's going to be my call at that point in May. Here we are in March. you find your comfort zone, but don't worry so much about the council at this point. Just think about what you see in this budget, how comfortable you are doing the various things that the superintendent is recommending as possibilities. And let me take the heat for the other stuff. Maybe. I'll just blame Jim, so it doesn't matter. Go ahead.
Move the question.
Okay, we have a motion to move the question. Is there a second to that? All in favor of moving the question? Opposed? Terry, you get that? 2 in opposition, Lisa and Bill?
3 in
3 was another one? I'm screened. This is not a good place for me to see visually. Never mind here. Okay, 3 in opposition. All right, all in favor of moving the question, please raise your hand. Opposed? We got 3?
3 and
3,
3.
3? Right. I know. I'm thinking.
Do you need more time to talk about it? Is that what yeah, they need more time to talk about
Pardon?
it. They're feeling like they need more time to talk about this.
Okay.
and to, you know.
If we could, if people would want, we'll just take a recess.
Yeah, I mean, no?
Are you all set?
A recess would be, a recess would be.
One way or the other.
Can't recess in the middle of a...
I know. We, okay, so the motion is
It's 3-3.
to move the question. So I'm going to vote in affirmative to move it. Okay? So we move the question. All in favor of the motion to reduce by 120, reduce by 19, and add the 25, which is a 3.3% change, please raise your hand. Opposed? You got 3, 3. I'm going to go with the 3.3.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Let me explain why, too. Let me explain, because again, I'm thinking big picture, and I really have some serious questions about that, but again, at least for this point in time, I think it allows for further discussion and commentary, but I'm still very worried about the whole process. Anyway. Motion to adjourn by Heather, second by Mr. Emerson. All in favor, please raise your hand.
Nope.
Oh, we got more stuff? I didn't see that.
It's there too.
Do that?
And we just, I mean, it's there. It's up 16,000. Adult ed.
We still got stuff to discuss. Where you going? Oh, you're leaving.
We still have adult ed and food service we have to pass on.
Can we take a recess? A recess. I vote we take a
Bye,
recess.
Pat.
Yes.
Bye, Pat.
Recess? He has to tell us. Alan, recess. Recess.
Okay, I'm going to declare a 5-minute recess. First item to look at is a benefit adult education. For fiscal year 14, we're looking at a figure of 298,65791, which shows an increase of $16,834.91.
I make
If
a
you have any
motion to
questions, I'm
approve
sure
it.
Terry will be glad to answer them,
Second.
or
We have a motion to
Paulette's in the
approve it.
audience.
And a second?
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Motion is by Tony, second is by Heather. Any discussion? Yes, Mr. Emerson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, it's difficult to tell from this, what, are there any impacts on personnel? We obviously know that the director has now been merged with JFK principal, but are there any other personnel-related changes built into the budget?
Paulette, would you like to? Good evening, thanks for sticking around.
Yes, there are some staff impacts. Besides the director position, we have cut the supervision aides in the evening that cover COT and the high school for the evening classes. We have also reduced 1 hour in our computer tech time per week. And there's a 25% reduction in total to our instructors and 50% reduction overall to the aides. And that's in the adult literacy budget portion of the services that adult ed provides. We also, in terms of another impact, there is an additional position that we'll be sharing with the high school. I believe it's now called the Student Services Truancy Coordinator position, and a portion of our budget is also supporting that position. And we've also reduced the number of hours that we will be providing GED testing by 80 hours a year.
And were the reductions based on budgetary constraints or based on redesign?
I would say the restraints. I also want to note that, if I didn't, that we've cut, one of the unique things about the Biddeford Adult Ed, and there are many unique things that I have found, and that we are one of the most comprehensive adult ed programs in the state. We provide free childcare to those students while they're taking classes with us during the day. We've reduced that service to 2 days a week. It's been 4. We've had to reduce that also to 2.
Yes.
Which is a cut in that person's. It's not only a cut to our student services, it's also a cut to the employee.
I guess my question has to do with, I guess there's a new GED testing, whole curriculum
Correct.
testing coming out.
And it's going to be electronic.
Right,
And so you'll see in the budget, there's money in there for computers.
right.
Yep.
And so I was just thinking that maybe when you reduce your hours of the testing, that new way of doing things might be okay.
Might be
And-
okay. I think the other thing is that we've provided services for GED testing 5 days a week, and I think that will be cut
Yep.
back, and there will be scheduled times of people will need to make those accommodations in order to take the test. The other thing I want to note about at this time, there's a number of things in the budget that we don't know about. One, we don't know our subsidy. We don't know what the AFLA grant will be providing to us. And in terms of the GED testing, we don't know at this point who the service vendor will be. There's been talk about it being Pearson, now it might be McGraw-Hill, what the service fees may be involved with that. There will be a we will need to train our staff. There's a lot of professional development that needs to be happening in the next year or two with the adult ed staff around some of the changes that are coming down from the state. And so you'll see money in the professional development lines where some work needs to be done. The other thing I want to make a notation about along with these cuts that I feel is important is that we have staff that have not received any increases in their pay for at least a couple of years, especially those folks that are working at the Learning Center. And I've had it's a real honor for me to be able to do both jobs, as much as it's a lot of work. It's an honor because I get to see the kids coming in and starting their career with us, and then I also get to see the other end. And the Learning Center and the stuff that goes on there, we're not just a school that provides enrichment classes. What goes on there, you can't put a price tag. The relationships that the staff builds with those students, there's no price tag for that. And when I look at the list of names, I know a lot of those kids that are now involved in adult ed. I had them when they were younger. And all I can say is I am so proud of them to be at adult ed and to be involved in getting their high school diploma in whatever track they have to take. So with that said, and I know it's late, I could talk a lot more about adult ed, what we're doing, what they do, the direction we need to go, but I won't, because I could go on, and it's 10 o'clock at night. So.
Just one thing I'd like to add to this is that I think that this is a budget that will continue to be refined a lot between now and when you guys vote again. One, just because of the fact that, and this is nothing against Sue, but this is adult ed with a whole lot of a different look because we've had some experience in the school department. And I think the other day when we were just sitting in the office, the three of us together, Paulette's knowledge about things that get done in the school department, they're not necessarily for any reason that Sue wouldn't have come in contact with. We started generating some really different ideas. You know, like one of them is, hey, what space do we have here, and can we talk about bus routes changes in the city to drop? So I think there's a whole evolution that still will occur between now and May on this budget. And there might be some requests to go up a little bit because there's something that comes our way, and there may be some that goes down as we learn of ways that costs in the school and in adult education can kind of mirror each other a little bit more. And some of that is just how we organize ourselves in space will help.
The piece also I just want to mention, if I didn't, about the GED computers. The question may come up as to why can't you use the computers in the computer labs? We have computer labs throughout this school district. Why can't you use those? Why do you need to buy new computers? The laws around and the rulings around GED testing are very strict. And as we make this move and as we move, the GED testing currently takes place you know, at the adult ed office at the high school. We're going to have to go through some steps here in terms of getting a new space approved. In addition to that, the computers that are used for testing cannot be contaminated with any other kinds of use. So it's not like we can just go up to the high school library and click on and use those computers. They're pretty strict about those computers, have to be solely used for testing. So.
Mr. Moriarty?
I just wanted to say thank you, Paulette. It's been I'm sure you've had to do a tremendous amount of work, and I just want to make sure, you know, we said thank you and appreciate all that you've done.
Well, I think also to acknowledge the adult ed staff. They do a a great job. There's a lot of stuff that they do that's not funded that they're providing for their students that I have quickly found out about, like serving them breakfast for 5 days a week, because many of them come to school not fed or being hungry, or it's the only meal they get. And with our ESL students, adult students that are coming in, they do a phenomenal job with them. So I want to give them kudos too for the short time I've been working with them. They're hard workers and they do a great job. So with very little. So.
Mrs. Florin?
I just wanted to say I'm excited about the new GED computerized testing. I had a chance to work with Wells for a little bit and got a little glimpse, but there's probably going to be a lot of opportunity to collaborate with other districts in the training portion of it, simply because everybody's going to be starting fresh. So that's going to be exciting too, knowing that we're trying to work with other districts, and so that'll be good.
There are some districts that may be opting out as well.
Any other questions?
Right.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You have a split role, and in doing that, you're very dependent upon the support of staff, because you can't be everywhere at once. Do these reductions impact staff and your ability to delegate to continue to drive forward? It's unclear to me the impact of the reductions. For instance, they were budgetary as opposed to designed, which meaning the process workflow didn't change to create savings. So I'm a little, it's great, I believe, to have one person responsible for both areas, but you have to have the support staff or the staff to be able to manage both.
Mm.
I'm just curious of.
I think where I see well, in both departments, there's an impact from a leadership or organizational standpoint. I think some of it, with like adult ed, it might get a little easier because this is on-the-job training, so some of this is new. But for example, at Kennedy, where I see the impact is if I'm not in the building. I don't have an assistant principal to cover things or to delegate to. Kennedy has a phenomenal teaching staff that does a great job. But there are some things that the principal has to take care of or deal with. So when I'm not there, or if I'm not there, like this past week, I was dealing with a lot of adult ed stuff, so I was out of the building more. You begin to see that impact a little bit. And then it's like, I got to pull the reins in one area to put some energy there because I don't have somebody to delegate to. Over time, Kennedy has lost their support staff, and we're down to a half-time social worker that I share with BIS. He does a great job trying to cover both buildings. But, sometimes I'll say to him, are you going to be here today, or when are you here today? He and I are trying to work out our schedules so that if I have to go to a meeting for adult ed or whatever, that's a challenge because I'm not always comfortable leaving the building. So that is an impact. I think time management is a critical skill that I have to have. Which I think I do for the most part. And I think on the other end, in adult learning, I'm going to have to reassign responsibilities and roles. There's a lot to that job. There's a lot in terms of dealing with the state contracts, grants, that sort of thing, meeting with people, a lot of relationship that need to be always being worked with, like with the Career Center or the Department of Labor, things like that are important. There are certain things you can't delegate to someone else. The director needs to be involved with it. Sue does a great job. She oversees all of our certificate programs. She does a lot of work with the budget, the payroll, works closely with Terry. You know, people at the Learning Center work as a team and kick in, but again, there's only so much that everyone can do. So there is an impact.
Mrs. Florent?
Couple of questions. One, do you have any of the Beckett Family Services people within JFK to help? Yeah, I didn't know if that might be, you know, a resource during the times that you're gone. The other thing I wondered is the proximity.
They're not a resource in terms of if in dealing with various disciplinary issues or making those types of decisions or.
Because they're dealing with specific
They're
student
assigned to
populations.
one child
Gotcha.
and
Okay,
only that
so
child.
that's not, okay.
Yep.
My other thought was proximity. You've got 2 programs, so if you were able to bring at least the administrative staff, or is that something you're thinking about?
That's what we're working
Is that going to
on.
help with a little bit? Yeah. And do you have any suggestions on what we could do to support you to make it successful so that those pieces are addressed that you just shared as kind of concerns? Or you're going to work through it and then come back to us and say, hey,
I mean, I
where are
think
you
one
at?
of the biggest things, and I've discussed this with Jeremy when I've talked about the JFK budget specifically, is that I do think that we need to have somebody there. I've been fortunate enough, or we've been fortunate, that we haven't had to have that kind of support staff because I've been involved with the students, and I've been there to be involved with the students in supporting them, but that's not going to be happening as much. It can't happen as much. Even if I'm in the building, it can't happen as much if I'm writing a 25-page grant for the state, because adult ed subsidy is dependent on that. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, so someone can be in the building, but it doesn't mean you can be available to do it. And those kinds of things are difficult to do. You know, you can't be interrupted once you start getting into those types of activities. And so.
Any other questions? Thank you. Seeing none, all in favor of the budget, please raise your hand. Opposed? Mr. Emerson in opposition? Thank you. Next
Thank you.
item is the hot lunch financial statement.
Make a motion to accept.
Moved and seconded to accept the hot lunch budget. Any discussion? See none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Mr. Emerson, did you have delay?
It's affirmative. I mean, I didn't vote, so it's-
Well, go ahead. Go ahead. You want to ask a question before we vote?
I'm just was wondering if Terry or someone could just hit if there's anything that we should be aware of before we vote, because we certainly have not gone through this.
Really, on the hot lunch program, there are really no changes whatsoever in the process. The only thing that's really a benefit for us, Jim, in the entire budget is that the service contracts for the freezers and some monitoring of the refrigeration units got picked up in the Honeywell contract. And so we will actually theoretically not have those expenses that come out of there, which, you know, those could go from $5,000 a year up to a really bad situation. So we would, you know, hopefully continue to see a budget that is to the positive. I mean, Hot Lunch seems to be making money for us, or has been, and there's no reason to expect that that would be changed.
Last year, the rates were changed, if I remember right?
Correct. And usually it's usually about May when the federal government will come out and say, this is the minimum you can charge for this, and then everybody has to redo their rates.
And if, Terry, there's a, I don't know if this is a special revenue fund or enterprise fund, but the balance in the fund has gone up? Is that true?
Yes, this is an enterprise fund, and last year it got back into the positive, barely, but it got back into the positive. It was in the negative for a couple of years because we had major van and equipment purchases. She doesn't see that coming up in the future, so at this point.
This year it should help continue to replenish.
At this point, yeah, we're hoping it's gonna keep going in the forward direction.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
And I don't know the answer to this, it's almost like I should know, but if they're, you know, if they're in the positive and there's extra money there, I'm looking at like, how do we give them the increase in the salaries? We look at, they're like the worst paid, so to speak, in the district. They're not really compensated like they should. Can you use part of that revenue to pay salaries?
That revenue from hot lunch program can be used in many, many different ways. Some people carry a balance. Some school departments wipe it clean at the end of the year and use it as revenue to the general fund. And then you have school departments who fund out of the general budget because they operate at a loss. So however you use those funds that are left over is kind of, it's a revenue generation or loss, and you can choose how to pay your employees with that. Anytime a school department has a situation where you're not funding hot lunch through the general fund, you are in good shape. I mean, that's a huge positive. You know, a year ago, I was in a situation where over time there had been a fund balance. They had transferred it over to buy some equipment into the general fund, non-lunch resources, and then they had a couple of years where things went for the worse, and you know, you had to put a little money back in. So it's kind of all dependent on what you choose to do with that fund, those funds.
Anyone else? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? It's a vote. Are we done, Terry?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? It's a vote.